the Northern Alliance. We've now chased the Taliban out, and in all kinds of provinces where the farmers had started to plant wheat, they're now plowing up their fields and putting in opium instead. And the global drug authorities at the UN expect that we're going to go back to the record flow of opium that we've seen in the last couple of years.
But we heard right after the attacks on September 11th, Tony Blair saying, we will bomb the poppy fields. Well, there are no poppy fields. They destroyed their crops. I was in Moscow, Russia in March of this year, and I found out that Uzbekistan, and we're going to get to Uzbekistan in a minute, was awash in a sea of poppies. And what did I find also was that companies like Southern Air Transport, Evergreen, and other CIA-connected affiliates had been flying into and out of Tashkent. The CIA had been setting up operations that were proprietary companies all over the place in Uzbekistan. So now we have the destruction of an opium crop, which does what? It takes cash out of the world's banking system. In conjunction with a stock market bubble, in conjunction with world oil prices or world oil production diminishing, and a huge bubble on Wall Street. Now we come to, this is just from recently, of course. This is from the October 5th. Afghan rebels, that's the Northern Alliance, our good friends. The Northern Alliance, who actually dominate the opium trade from the north of Afghanistan. Okay, now we've seen the recent stories saying that the poppy farmers are absolutely rejoicing because they've gone back to planting. So now we come back to the oil and drugs. There's an old saying, God equals gold, oil, and drugs. Okay? Testimony from February 12, 1998 in Washington, D.C. before the House International Relations Committee by John Maresca, Vice President of International Relations for UNICAL, which had been planning to build a pipeline for some time from the Central Asian oil fields of Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan, all the stands, across Afghanistan down to the Pakistani coast. It's a distance of about 1,500 miles. To a terminal where U.S. tankers would take the oil and gas and ship it to China and Japan, the largest emerging markets in the world. China's in the middle of a huge oil crisis, and the U.S. Wall Street is pouring money into China hand over fist. And he says in this, construction cannot begin construction until an internationally recognized Afghanistani government is in place. A recent study for the World Bank states that the proposed pipeline for Central Asia across Afghanistan and Pakistan to the Arabian Sea would provide more favorable netbacks, that's money in your pocket, folks, to oil producers. That's his testimony. Now, UNICAL put the pipeline on hold in 1999. They also hired a guy named Henry Kissinger to consult for them, which explains why Afghanistan has never been listed as a sponsoring terrorist nation. Isn't that strange? The head of all the terrorists in the world, and the biggest country, has never been listed? Okay, U.S. companies to invest in Pakistan oil and gas sectors. This is from a Pakistani newspaper, the Frontier Post. The date is, what is the date? October 10th. And what this says, now October the 10th is after we've gone to war, after the attacks on World Trade Center, after we know, is anybody surprised at how quickly we kind of won in Afghanistan? Okay. Well, the war's been planned for 4 years, and I'm saving the best for last. But the U.S. ambassador to Pakistan met with the Pakistani oil minister and briefed the ambassador on the proposed Turkmenistan-Afghanistan Pakistan gas pipeline, and said that this project opens up new avenues of multidimensional regional cooperation, particularly in view of the recent geopolitical developments in the region. Gee, the pipeline that was blocked is now back on full tilt just days after we started the bombing. Suspicious. Okay, maybe I haven't convinced you of everything, but we're just getting warmed up now. This is how Afghanistan went unlisted as a terrorist sponsor. This is the story that I found, and it says right here, Unical hired former State Department insiders, former Secretary of State Henry Kissinger, former Special U.S. Ambassador John. The guy was also, I didn't see that. The Unical guy was also a special ambassador. And Robert Oakley, a former U.S. ambassador to Pakistan. You're going to love where Henry Kissinger turns up on this, by the way. All right. This is one other thing about Kissinger. Chinese oil firm picks Kissinger as advisor. This is from November 4th. Thank you. The Chinese National Offshore Oil Company has hired Henry Kissinger to head its foreign advisory board. Now, Kissinger's got the Pakistan end and he's got the China end of this oil pipeline. Who does Henry Kissinger front for?
Rockefeller.
Very good. David Rockefeller. Who's that? Zbigniew Brzezinski. Zbigniew Brzezinski was counselor for strategic and international studies, professor of American foreign policy at Johns Hopkins, national security advisor to President Jimmy Carter, trustee and founder of the Trilateral Commission, member of the Council on Foreign Relations, international advisor to several major corporations, associate of Henry Kissinger, also worked for Ronald Reagan in intelligence capacities. Co-chairman of the Bush National Security Advisory Task Force in 1988. What a guy. Zbig. Now, if you want to get really, 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 really angry, go buy this book. It's called The Grand Chessboard. American Primacy and Its Geostrategic Objectives. Written by Zbigniew Brzezinski in 1997. I'm going to read you some quotes from that book. Page XII, it's the very first words in the book. The last decades of the 20th century has witnessed a tectonic shift in world affairs. For the first time ever, a non-Eurasian power has emerged not only as a key arbiter of Eurasian power relations, but also as the world's paramount power. The defeat and collapse of the Soviet Union was the final step in the rapid ascendance of a Western Hemisphere power, the United States as the sole and indeed the first truly global superpower. Page XII, it's in the preface. But in the meantime, he says, it is imperative that no Eurasian challenger, Eurasia is everything in between roughly east of Germany all the way to the Pacific Ocean, south through the Indian subcontinent, and includes the Middle East. It's imperative that no Eurasian challenger, by that he means Russia or China, emerges capable of dominating Eurasia and thus of also challenging America. The formulation of a comprehensive and integrated Eurasian geostrategy is therefore the purpose of this book, Geostrategy, Eurasia. The attitude of the American public toward the external projection of American power has been much more ambivalent. The public supported America's engagement in World War II largely because of the shock effect of the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor. It gets worse. For America, the chief geopolitical prize is Eurasia. Now a non-Eurasian power, that's us, is preeminent in Eurasia, and America's global primacy, isn't that arrogant? America's global primacy is directly dependent on how long and how effectively its preponderance on the Eurasian continent is sustained. What he's saying is that if the U.S. wants to stay top dog, we have to control Eurasia. America's withdrawal from the world, or because of the sudden emergence of a successful rival, would produce massive international stability. It would prompt global anarchy. You know what he's saying there? Yeah, a little global anarchy would probably be a damn good thing right now. What he's saying there is if we don't control the world by whatever means necessary, the world's going to be miserable. He didn't ask my opinion. Did he ask yours? Okay. In that context, how America manages Eurasia, do we manage people around the world? Is that our job? Is critical. Eurasia is the globe's largest continent and is geopolitically axial. A power that dominates Eurasia would control 2 of the world's 3 most advanced and economically productive regions. A mere glance at the map also suggests that control over Eurasia would almost automatically entail Africa's subordination, rendering the Western Hemisphere and Oceania, that's Australia, for all of you non-academics, geopolitically peripheral to the world's central continent. About 75% of the world's people live in Eurasia, and most of the world's physical wealth is there as well, both in its enterprises and underneath its soil. Eurasia accounts for 60% of the world's GNP and 3/4 of the world's known energy resources. 2 basic steps are thus required. First, to identify the geostrategically dynamic Eurasian states that have the power to cause a potentially important shift in the international distribution of power and to decipher the central external goals of their respective political elites and the likely consequences of their seeking to attain them. Second, to formulate specific U.S. policies to offset, co-opt, and or control the above. The man is talking about co-opting, controlling, managing, subverting nations and peoples and economies. To put it in a terminology that harkens back to the more brutal age of ancient empires, the 3 grand imperatives of imperial geostrategy are to prevent collusion and maintain security dependence among the vassals, to keep tributaries pliant and protected, and to keep the barbarians from coming together. That's on page 40. I'm telling you, you got to buy the book. Now we get really serious. On page 95, Uzbekistan, with its much more ethnically homogeneous population of approximately 25 million and its leaders emphasizing the country's historic glories, has become increasingly assertive in affirming the region's new post-colonial status. He saw the first step in this as diminishing the ability of Russia to reassert the dream of the Soviet Union. All the stands in Central Asia were once part of the Soviet Union. The borders were drawn arbitrarily by Lenin and Stalin. And he saw one of the most important steps was to prevent Russia from asserting any control in the region, which we did. You know how we did it? Over the last decade, thanks to Goldman Sachs, the Harvard Endowment, the U.S. Treasury and the Federal Reserve, the World Bank, we looted $300 billion out of the Russian economy. $300 billion. I was there. The Russian population was, 164 million at the fall of the Soviet Union. The population of Russia is today 145 million. In another 10 years, it will be 130 million. The average life expectancy of a male in Russia has dropped to 48 years. Thanks to the economic devastation, the ruin we visited on their economy, it was a deliberate plan to weaken Russia so that it couldn't challenge our move into Eurasia a decade later. It helps if you see this on the map. Okay? Russia, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, Iran, Afghanistan, Pakistan, India, and China. Now, the proposed oil route is from here to here, 1,500 miles. China can't build it because it's 5,000 miles, and they don't have the technology to build it. We do, thanks to a company named Halliburton, which was chaired with the CEO was Dick Cheney, right? Okay, they're probably going to build the pipeline. Okay, so now that you see this relationship, what he's saying is, you build a block starting with Islamic fundamentalism, which we've supported and created, to keep Russia from moving south